Hello again. I was in a large branch of Waterstones bookshop in London yesterday and could not help noticing the strange nature of their display there for young adults. Two things in particular seemed odd. The display can be seen in the thumbnail to this video. Now, I'm very interested in books. I write them, I read them, I look at them. I like to see young people encouraged to read more. Books are a bit of a thing of mine. So it was that I couldn't help poking around the children's section to see what, if anything, is being done to encourage young people to read. I found that a sign on the display there promised new and classic books. But the oldest book there was published only in 2017, and the rest were nearly all from 2020 and this year. In other words, very new stuff indeed. The other thing which I noticed was that most were first published in the United States, and every single one was written by a black author. This was odd. No variety at all. Just a bunch of books, nearly all of which were only published last year, all by black authors and almost all in America. I assumed at first this must be some special thing to mark Black History Month or something of that sort. But when I asked the staff, they looked at me as if I was asking a really weird question. They pretended that the books hadn't been chosen so that only black authors were represented, nor that they had been deliberately selected so that none of the books are more than a year or two old. Inevitably, I felt obliged to leaf through the books and found they were all written in a very restricted vocabulary which no 14-year-old would have had any difficulty in grasping. In other words, these are not books which will stretch adolescents or get them thinking. No unusual words, no complex grammatical styles, all of them written in a very demotic style. So nothing really to push children or to stretch their imagination or anything. I'm not sure what to make of this. It's clear that Waterstones had chosen as a matter of policy to make sure that only black authors who have written books for young adults in the last year or two were being promoted. But equally, they were determined to deny that they were doing so, which was a bit strange. I'm guessing this is part of the reaction to the Black Lives Matter movement, and I also think it likely that they only put together that display after the verdict was announced in the trial relating to the death of George Floyd. So it's out with Tolkien, C.S. Lewis, even James Baldwin, and in with a bunch of recent books by people nobody has even heard of. I've noticed actually that Waterstones have been getting a little unorthodox in their ways over the last year or so. For instance, I wanted to look for books on popular science, an interest of mine. There was a section on travel, one on spirituality, a place for sport. Everything else was just grouped as non-fiction, with history, science, biography and everything else all just jumbled up together in one place. There has, since last summer, looking back at the business about those books for young adults, been something of a sea change in matters relating to race and ethnicity in Britain, and I suppose we shall have to wait and see how it all ends. I mentioned yesterday about the Church of England decided to employ 42 racial justice officers, but they're doing something even more bizarre than that. In 1982, the Archbishop of Canterbury was Robert Runcie. He was the first archbishop since the Middle Ages actually to have killed men in battle. He fought during the Second World War. In 1982, the Nigerian government presented him with two reproduction busts. They're just cheap copies of the old Benin bronzes. You can buy such things in markets in Nigeria that were made in the early 1980s. Loads of people have bought stuff like that back from Nigeria. The Church of England, though, as part of their decolonisation and renunciation of imperialism, have now announced that they will return them to Nigeria. so they can be placed in a museum there. So if any Nigerian museum would want stuff like that, which was knocked out for the tourist trade 40 years ago. This is just one instance of how the decolonisation business and BLM craze is starting to get out of hand a bit.